Sanchez, a 17-year-old high school student residing in a quaint rural town in West Virginia. The trajectory of my life has been rather unremarkable until recently, when I perceived myself as an ordinary American teenager. Despite being an only child, I was nurtured in an affectionate household, endowed with a favorable beginning by my parents. While we are not affluent, our family enjoys a satisfactory life. I maintained respectable grades in school, occupied the role of a running back in the football team, cultivated a close-knit group of friends, and cherished a relationship with my lovely girlfriend, Emily. Naturally, I experienced the moody phases characteristic of adolescence and the typical high school dramas. Occasionally, I found myself in minor predicaments, but nothing gravely severe. On the whole, I was a contented youth with a promising future ahead, envisioning college and the construction of my own path in life. Yet after the incident, everything underwent an irrevocable transformation, compelling me to confront the fact that the entirety of my existence was founded on falsehood. When I disclosed that I was involved in a car accident, your mind might conjure up an image of a gruesome collision that left me shattered and incapacitated. However, this isn't the scenario. In many aspects, I was fortunate. It happened during the late hours of a Saturday night when I was driving back home after attending a party. I am thankful that I refrained from consuming alcohol that evening, but I was culpably driving above the speed limit and concurrently engaged in texting. Undeniably a recipe for disaster. I lost control of the vehicle on a quiet back road just a few miles away from home. The car veered off the smooth pavement, hurtling directly towards the unyielding trunk of an ancient tree. I can vividly recall that instant of sheer terror right before impact, when I was convinced that my life would meet a violent and premature end. It's often said that one's entire life flashes before their eyes in the moments preceding a brush with death. This held true for me as well, except for one peculiar difference. The life I recollected was not my own, but someone else's. The following morning, I regained consciousness in a hospital bed, engulfed by pain coursing through my body. Slowly, I opened my eyes, surveying the unfamiliar surroundings as grogginess clung to me. Standing over me were my parents, their eyes brightening with relief as I re-entered the realm of awareness. Anticipating their ire due to my reckless driving, I was surprised to witness their relief at my survival from the crash intact. Nevertheless, I hadn't emerged entirely unharmed. Oddly, my car's airbag hadn't deployed, resulting in a head injury, several cracked ribs, and a fractured leg that would temporarily bench me from playing football. Yet this wasn't my primary concern. The moment I woke up, a sense of wrongness settled upon me. The accident had transformed me into someone different, flooding my mind with perplexing images and memories. Despite my 17 years, this marked my first encounter with a car crash, yet a profound sense of déjà vu washed over me. There was more. My mind housed a jumble of incomprehensible images and experiences. I endeavored to articulate my turmoil to my parents, but their comprehension eluded them. How could they fathom it? Although worried, Mom and Dad suspected a hidden brain injury. They insisted on a CT scan, the results of which turned out to be clear. Though my physical injuries didn't threaten my life and no medical indications of brain trauma were found, they discharged me to complete my recovery at home. However, deep within, I recognized that I wasn't well, far from it. My previous life seemed distant. I became distant from my parents, greeted friends, and even my girlfriend with mere nods during their visits. Gradually, I withdrew, retreating to the confines of my room. My throbbing brain toiled incessantly, striving to unravel the chaos within. I cannot precisely pinpoint how it occurred, but one day, like pieces of a puzzle falling into place, everything connected. A deluge of memories, hidden away in the recesses of my mind, surged forth. Even then, I might have brushed it off as a trauma-induced paranoid illusion. Yet, as I delved into online searches for dates and names, astonishing evidence materialized. You know, I wasn't always the teenage high school student in West Virginia. I've led a different existence as another person, growing up in a distant country. I've somehow been reborn, given a fresh opportunity as a new individual in a different body. It seems my past life was meant to be erased from my memory, but my accident and head injury seemed to have stirred recollections that were supposed to fade away. However, Pandora's box has been opened now, and there's no returning to my previous state of blissful ignorance. I'm also unable to confide in anyone about my recollections, not my parents, my girlfriend, or any of my friends or acquaintances. Instead, I've opted to share my account here, hoping that those acquainted with the supernatural and the afterlife might comprehend and perhaps show some empathy for my dilemma, though that might not be the case. As you'll come to understand, my prior incarnation committed something terrible, perhaps even unforgivable. He made a cursed bargain that caused others to suffer so he, or rather I, could attain what I desired. Nevertheless, if you choose to continue reading, I only request that you withhold judgment until you've heard the entire narrative. My chronicle takes root in the early 1990s, almost 15 years before I was reborn in my present form. In those days, I went by the name Michael Ferguson and was an unemployed Scotsman in his late 20s, residing in a housing estate on the outskirts of Glasgow. My earlier life, upbringing, and family are etched clearly in my memory. I remember attending school, getting into altercations, and the daily challenges of maturing in a working-class neighborhood during the 1980s. I distinctly recollect playing and sometimes quarreling with my siblings, watching British TV programs, savoring haggis, having my first pint, brawls outside the pub, my initial romantic encounter, and toiling on construction sites. Most of these experiences were entirely foreign to the young Omar. I could recount my early life as Michael Ferguson, but I'm confident that wouldn't captivate your interest. The true essence of my story begins on a chilly autumn day in October 1993, as I sat in my squalid bedsit, my head throbbing from a hangover induced by the bottle of inexpensive vodka I had consumed the previous night. During that period, I found myself in a state of despair after being laid off from my job 3 months prior. Securing another job had proven fruitless, causing a severe blow to my self-esteem. My finances were depleted by my spending on cigarettes and alcohol, resulting in overdue rent and unpaid bills. My neglect extended to my girlfriend Lisa, annoying her to the point of her eventual breakup with me. The ultimate betrayal, as I saw it, was when Lisa and my best friend Andy became a couple, further plunging me into a pit of self-pity and self-destruction. I believe I had hit rock bottom, reclining on my worn-out sofa, contemplating my woeful circumstances. On that particular day, I seriously entertained the idea of combining painkillers with vodka to bring an end to my life. And then she arrived. My head was still pounding when a forceful knock echoed at my front door. I audibly groaned at the intrusive disruption, wanting no company in my current condition. It had been a considerable time since friends or family had visited to check on me. My toxic behavior had driven them all away, truth be told. My assumption was that the visitor was either a door-to-door salesman or a Jehovah's Witness. Thus, I chose to ignore the persistent banging, hoping they'd eventually relent and depart. But that wasn't the case. Instead, the banging grew fiercer, almost shattering my front door. Summoning the energy, I hoisted myself from the sofa, my head still throbbing, and muttered irritably, "Fine, I'm coming." My anger remained as I unfastened the latch on my front door. I was fully prepared to give an earful to this uninvited guest until I laid eyes on her and all my rage dissolved. The young woman standing before me was breathtaking. It wasn't just her physical allure, though her long red hair cascading and the snug black business attire accentuating her figure were captivating. Yes, I found her attractive, but it was more profound than that. Gazing into her deep green eyes, I felt as though I were submerged, and her sweet smile, framed by ruby lips, weakened my knees. I had never been a believer in anything as far-fetched as love at first sight, but an immediate attraction and connection to this young lady did stir within me. It felt as though fate had meticulously crafted the ideal woman for me, dispatching her to my doorstep precisely when I needed it most. This deluge of emotions engulfed me in that initial moment, and all of this occurred before the enigmatic woman had uttered a single word. Paralyzed by her beauty, I stood at the doorway, rendered speechless. As it happened, she took the initiative in making introductions. "Hello, Michael. My name is Lilith. I am here to assist you in transforming your life." Her voice bore an elegant cadence, though her accent proved elusive to pinpoint. It bore a faint semblance to American English, yet bore hints of an indistinguishable origin. Nevertheless, her words flowed like honey into my ears, further deepening my sentiments towards her. I remained mute, grappling with how to respond to the enigmatic guest who had now identified herself as Lilith. "Well, won't you ask me in?" she inquired with a teasing smile. Blushing and flustered, I stammered, then fully swung the door open and stepped aside, murmuring, "Yes, absolutely. Please come inside." A graceful smile graced Lilith's lips as she entered my apartment, her high heels producing soft clicks on the hardwood floor. I observed her as she walked down the corridor, catching traces of her sweet perfume. I stood there, captivated and infatuated, before gently shutting the door. Of course, there were numerous cautionary signals that I should have heeded at that instant. I had neglected the fact that I knew nothing about this woman's true identity or her intentions. I also failed to question how she was privy to my first name, and she introduced herself as Lilith. Somewhere in the recesses of my memory, that name triggered a faint recollection, yet I struggled to place it precisely. With her beauty and charm, Lilith had managed to secure entry into my abode, but events took a more ominous turn once she crossed the threshold. Stepping into my living room behind Lilith, I witnessed her surveying the interior with an air of distaste. Her gaze swept over the soiled dishes, half-empty takeout containers, and an array of liquor bottles scattered about. Creating a spot for her handbag on the coffee table, she briskly cleared the assorted debris from the sofa before seating herself. "I must say I'm quite impressed with your interior decorating," she remarked with a heavy dose of sarcasm. In an instant, a wave of embarrassment washed over me as I fully comprehended the deplorable state of my home. "Yeah, well, my maid's out sick," I replied in an attempt to brush it off. Lilith's expression remained unimpressed, and she regarded me with a mix of pity and disdain. I couldn't blame her. Not only was my apartment a mess, but I also looked the part. My clothes were stained, I sported unkempt facial hair, and the remnants of last night's drinking clung to me like a cloud. It was utterly foolish of me to even entertain the idea that someone as stunning as Lilith would take an interest in someone so far gone. Lilith let out an audible sigh and shook her head slightly. "Well, Michael, we need to have a serious conversation. You should probably sit down." Swallowing hard, a sense of foreboding crept over me as I sensed a shift in the atmosphere. Regardless, I complied with Lilith's suggestion and settled into a seat beside her. Her intoxicating perfume engulfed me, a stark contrast to my own unpleasant odor. Surprisingly, she didn't recoil, instead motioning for me to come closer as our eyes met. "Now, Michael, it's safe to say your life has taken a turn for the worse, wouldn't you agree?" My pride smarted, and I was reluctant to concede her point. "I'm just going through a rough patch. I'll bounce back," I asserted. Lilith responded with a derisive chuckle. "A rough patch," he says. "Well, let's tally up the score, Michael. You've lost your job. Your girlfriend has run off with your best friend. You're broke and drowning in alcohol. Your dingy little apartment is about to slip through your fingers, and you've successfully pushed away anyone who cared about you. Oh, and let's not forget that mere minutes before my arrival, suicide was on your mind. So, my dear friend, what's the grand plan for your big comeback?" A wave of nausea surged within me as her cutting words hit their mark, leaving me reeling with a mix of anger and confusion. "How in the world do you know all this?" I demanded, my voice laced with frustration. Lilith's lips curled into a smirk before she answered. "I know everything there is to know about you, Michael. Your darkest secrets, your loftiest aspirations. I can even offer you a glimpse of your future and guide you towards it." Shaking my head vehemently, a surge of anger eclipsed my previous disquiet. I realized I was being played, manipulated by Lilith, or whatever her real identity was. She had managed to unearth fragments of my life and was now leveraging them to gain control. Yet I wasn't about to let her succeed. I rose to my feet, my anger boiling over as I confronted the woman, my words a shout directed downward at her. "You must leave," I demanded with unwavering resolve. Her response was a composed retort. "That's not an option, Michael. Now regain your seat and control yourself." Her patronizing tone fueled my fury. I bellowed, "Get out this instant! Leave or I'll forcibly eject you!" Her laughter was a brazen display of mockery. "Certainly, do try that. Let's witness the outcome." Resorting to physical aggression against a woman was against my principles, but my patience had reached its limit. I extended my arm to grasp Lilith's, yet abruptly I was immobilized, rendered motionless by an unseen coercion that held me in its grip. I attempted to vocalize my distress, but even that semblance of control eluded me. Instead, my gaze shifted downward to Lilith, a malevolent grin on her lips, deriving amusement from my predicament. "It appears you require a more profound illustration of my influence over you," she remarked. The swiftness with which her entire demeanor transformed was striking. A sense of imminent danger engulfed me. "Proceed to the kitchen and retrieve a bread knife from the drawer," she commanded. Puzzlement lingered momentarily until my legs initiated movement, carrying me out of the room toward the modest kitchen. I struggled to halt this involuntary progression, horrified to realize I no longer commanded dominion over my body. Lilith had somehow seized dominion over me, manipulating me as if I were her personal marionette. In a state of terror, I could only bear witness as my hand opened the kitchen drawer and retrieved a gleaming knife. Moments later, my legs steered me back to the living room, where Lilith awaited. "Very good," she uttered with chilling composure. "Now hold the knife against your throat." I complied with the command, and a shiver ran down my spine as I felt the icy touch of steel against my skin. Every instinct within me protested vehemently, but I found myself utterly incapable of resisting. "You desire death, don't you?" Lilith inquired, her words laden with a chilling intent. "Shall I slit your throat?" At this juncture, my entire body trembled uncontrollably, sweat cascading from my pores and tears tracing their paths down my cheeks as I attempted to conjure a desperate plea for mercy from my immobilized lips. Meeting Lilith's gaze, which bore an intensity that could pierce steel, I thought I glimpsed a hint of empathy concealed beneath her unyielding exterior. "Release it," she commanded. Abruptly, the knife slipped from my grasp, landing innocuously upon the polished wooden floor. "Take a seat over there," she instructed further, and against my will, my legs propelled me across the room to settle into a chair that faced Lilith. She remained seated on the sofa, virtually unmoved throughout the entire ordeal, scarcely batting an eyelash. As I found my place, a sudden resurgence of control overcame my body, and I heaved a sigh of relief as I flexed my limbs. "Relax, Michael." Lilith's tone softened once more, her demonstration of power and assertion of authority having been made. "I don't intend to end your life. As I mentioned earlier, I am willing to assist you, if you permit me to do so." I shook my head, struggling to accept the surreal reality unfolding before me. A cacophony of unanswered inquiries reverberated through my weary mind. "What are you?" I ventured, my voice sheepish. "Some form of sorceress?" With a casual shrug of her shoulders, she brushed off the question before responding, "I suppose you could label me as such. To be fair, I've been branded with far less flattering names." Her response was evasive, leaving me still mired in confusion. While I recognized her potency, the true extent of her capabilities remained an enigma. "Why me? For what reason are you subjecting me to this?" I implored, my voice tinged with frustration. "It's because of your luck," she replied with a sly grin. "Michael, I perceive potential within you, and my employer does as well. We aim to offer you an opportunity to attain all your desires in life." "And what do you expect in return?" I inquired, my suspicion still intact. Lilith chuckled. "You're astute, Michael. You understand that there's no such thing as a free lunch in this world. Yes, a price must be paid, though that's something that lies further down the road." She paused momentarily, as if carefully selecting her next words. "At this moment, you're harboring bitterness and a deep-seated rage. I empathize. People have taken advantage of you throughout your life." "How would you even know?" I interjected, my anger surfacing. "Because I possess complete knowledge about you, Michael. I've already mentioned this, but it seems additional proof is necessary." Her revelation unnerved me, as I feared she might once again seize control of my body. Instead, she extended her hand and picked up the remote control from my coffee table. She used it to turn on my television, leaving me puzzled and intrigued as I swiveled my chair to face the screen. It became apparent that we weren't tuned into one of the regular channels. To my astonishment, I beheld myself on the screen. Except I was a child again, a 12-year-old donning my school uniform, navigating the playground on a gloomy morning. I observed the anxiety etched on my youthful face as I glanced around. Out of nowhere, an assault transpired. A significantly larger boy struck me from behind, propelling me to the unforgiving ground. The young version of me emitted a shocked squeal. I attempted to rise and defend myself, but the bully was now pinning me down, gripping my shirt collar forcefully. "Hand over your money, you little brat," he bellowed inches from my face. Defeated and frightened, the young me retrieved a few coins from my blazer pocket and relinquished them. The bully sneered as he claimed his spoils, spitting in my direction and delivering a harsh kick to my abdomen before sauntering away, laughter trailing behind him. Observing this past assault filled me with a surge of rage, and a torrent of distressing memories resurfaced. The bully's name was Angus, and he was 14 when I entered secondary school. Relentlessly, he targeted me, administering beatings, extorting my lunch money, and generally transforming my existence into a living nightmare for the subsequent 2 years, until his eventual expulsion. I had moved past the torment of schoolyard bullying, attributing it to a natural part of growing up. But as I watched the young version of myself being thrashed and degraded, those memories surged back in full force. My resentment for Angus rekindled, and an urge for retribution consumed me. As always, it seemed Lilith could grasp my innermost thoughts, and her question mirrored precisely what I was contemplating. "What does someone like him deserve? What would be an appropriate punishment?" Lilith inquired. I responded without a moment's hesitation, my heart brimming with pain and animosity. "He deserves to have the living daylights beaten out of him," I asserted firmly. "Very well," Lilith acquiesced, pressing another button on my remote. Suddenly, a new scene materialized on the screen, an ambiance of a dimly lit pub, heavy with smoke. I observed a man engaged in a game of pool and swiftly recognized him. Although more than a decade had passed since I'd laid eyes on Angus, I immediately identified him. Admittedly, he had gained weight and lost his hair, yet the malevolent glint in his eyes and the conceited grin on his lips persisted unchanged. I continued to watch as he played his game, entirely oblivious to the trio of men approaching him from behind. 3 skinheads radiating a thirst for violence. The first among them initiated the assault by shattering a pint glass against the back of Angus's head. Angus howled as the shards of glass punctured his skull. He lashed out erratically with his pool cue, yet his assailants wrested it from his grip. All 3 set upon him, subjecting him to a relentless barrage of punches from all angles while spewing obscenities and vitriol. Before long, Angus crumpled onto the floor, curling into a futile ball to shield himself. The skinheads exhibited no clemency, continuing to pummel him with their heavy boots. Eventually, the brutal onslaught concluded as the assailants deemed their victim had suffered enough. With cruel laughter, they departed, leaving Angus unconscious and sprawled in a pool of his own blood. Stunned, I struggled to reconcile myself with the savage assault I had just borne witness to. "Good Lord," I exclaimed, "was that genuine?" "Undoubtedly," Lilith affirmed with confidence. "You requested, and we fulfilled." Shaking my head in repugnance, I voiced, "I didn't ask for this. It's excessive." "I distinctly remember your words. He should have the living expletive kicked out of him. Don't deny that you didn't wish for this, because deep down you definitely did." "But is he—" I couldn't bring myself to say the next word, yet Lilith, as always, grasped my unspoken concern. "He'll survive," she responded. "Now let's proceed." I hadn't even had the chance to fully process what I had witnessed before the subsequent image materialized on the screen. Once again I saw myself, but this time I was fully grown, matching my current age. This scene took place only a few months ago, right before my life took a turn for the worse. I was in my work attire, seated within a cramped office space. Karen sat across from me, the stern office manager at the construction company I had been employed by. She was a middle-aged woman with blonde hair, slightly overweight, and her face heavily adorned with makeup. Karen was renowned for being strict and uncompromising. The scene that played out before me was a painful memory, as Karen was in the process of terminating my employment. Once more, a surge of anger engulfed me as I watched the unpleasant scene unfold. It was difficult to absorb her words, but certain phrases stuck, like subpar job performance and budget constraints. Nevertheless, the ultimate outcome was that I was let go without any severance package. However, what truly infuriated me was the smug, self-satisfied grin on her face as she handed me my dismissal notice. That woman always held a grudge against me, I muttered through clenched teeth. So what's your decision to be? Lilith intervened. What should her consequences be for taking away your means of livelihood? I needed a moment to reflect, as it was clear this was no longer a hypothetical query. Whatever judgment I passed would manifest on the screen before me and presumably impact reality as well. I should have halted the process then and there, but I didn't. I suppose the anger and resentment within me overwhelmed any rational thinking. She should experience loss just like I did, I finally voiced. She should lose her job. Lilith remained silent, opting instead to press a button on the remote control, revealing a fresh scene on my television screen. Before me, Karen occupied a room much like the one I had recently been in, enduring a tirade from the company's managing director. Subsequently, I witnessed her, teary-eyed and crestfallen, clearing her desk of its contents while her colleagues observed. Watching this unsettling scene unfold triggered a pang of guilt within me, yet Lilith continued without missing a beat. It's a sad sight. However, I believe Karen will recover from this setback. But Michael, there's one more revelation I have for you. Brace yourself. Her countenance grew more solemn as she altered the channel, presenting the subsequent sequence. My jaw descended as I recognized the all-too-familiar pair, my ex-girlfriend Lisa and my former best friend Andy. Seated together at a bar, they enjoyed their drinks and shared hearty laughter. I saw Andy inch closer to Lisa, his hand finding its place on her thigh. Although initially uneasy, Lisa adjusted and eventually held his hand, gazing into his eyes with an affectionate yearning. Andy whispered into my ex-girlfriend's ear. His voice, initially hushed, was somehow amplified by Lilith's manipulation of the remote control, making his words distinctly audible. What he uttered was this: "Let me tell you, babe, Michael isn't the right match for you. He's a buddy, sure, but he's not going anywhere in life. You deserve a true man, like me." Without hesitation, Andy leaned in for a kiss, and Lisa offered no resistance. Powerless, I watched as the couple surrendered to a fervent embrace. In that instance, an overwhelming fury consumed me. Rage surged, causing my face to flush and my knuckles to whiten as my fists clenched. I was already aware that they had initiated their relationship behind my back, but witnessing the seduction firsthand intensified my seething anger. Lisa's betrayal was agonizing, especially considering the brevity of our 6-month relationship. Yet it was Andy, my lifelong friend, who had taken the initiative. My anger escalated nearly to the point of eruption, yet a more distressing revelation loomed. The following scene struck me like a freight train as Andy and Lisa materialized in a bedroom, embracing in a vigorous and impassioned lovemaking session. Lisa's moans filled the air, leaving no doubt about her enjoyment. The maelstrom of anger, shame, and anguish overwhelmed me, my head reeling from the assault. An empty vodka bottle from the coffee table found its way into my grip, poised to be hurled at the screen with the entirety of my fury. But Lilith intervened. "No, Michael, this is not the way to handle this." She shot me a stern look, and I retreated, vividly recalling how effortlessly she used to manipulate me. However, my intense anger remained unabated, and I struggled to calm myself. Predictably, Lilith posed the unavoidable question, "So what do you think should befall your ex-friend Andy? What's the fitting retribution for a supposed best friend who betrays you so maliciously? For a scoundrel who steals your beloved and subjects you to public humiliation, making you feel utterly small, as if you're devoid of all masculinity?" My mind was ablaze, my eyes ablaze with fury. All the while I continued to observe Andy and Lisa engaging in intimate acts within that hotel room. I should have taken a breath and walked away, yet I persisted. Through gritted teeth, I uttered the next words that would haunt me indefinitely. "He deserves to perish. That treacherous bastard should meet his end for the suffering he's caused me." My gaze shifted to Lilith, catching a glint in her emerald eyes as she pressed a button on the remote control. A simple action that would forever alter the course of my life. The scene changed, revealing a construction site at dawn as laborers started their day. Andy emerged, clad in a hard hat and fluorescent vest, strolling casually toward the site, his whistling portraying a carefree demeanor. The poor soul had no inkling of the impending danger. In an instant, my horror surged as the scaffolding at the front of the partially erected building groaned before giving way. Andy's gaze darted upward at the last second, a shriek of pure terror escaping his lips as a mass of metal and bricks descended upon him, obliterating his fragile form and entombing him beneath the rubble. "Oh my God," I stammered, my entire being quaking, a searing ache gnawing at the back of my head. Witnessing Andy's demise provided no satisfaction. Instead, I was engulfed by overwhelming guilt. Irrevocable words had been spoken, driven by my desire for Andy's demise during that fateful moment. I sat before the television, my stare vacant, overcome by shock as I grappled with the reality of what had transpired. Almost unnoticed, Lilith rose from her seat, her high heels tapping against the wooden floor as she approached me. Her delicate hand rested firmly on my shoulder, a surge of energy coursing through me, jolting me back to reality. When I locked eyes with her unwavering emerald gaze, I comprehended that an unbreakable bond now united us. We were forever linked by blood. "Michael," she said softly, her voice gentle, "what's done is done. The incident will be seen as an accident, and the authorities won't trace it back to you. Your life will change now, Michael. Things will improve. It might be some time before our paths cross again." With a deep sigh, she withdrew her hand from my shoulder. She picked up her handbag from the table, walked across my small flat, and exited through the front door. I stood there alone, staring at an empty screen. That night, sleep eluded me as the events of the day replayed in my mind. As expected, the call came the next day. A mutual friend informed me of Andy's death, a tragic accident at his workplace. I managed to gather myself for the funeral. Among the mourners dressed in black, I found myself in a somber graveyard on a gray morning. I couldn't bear to look at Andy's family. The image of his grieving mother was too heart-wrenching. During the wake, Lisa approached me with tear-filled eyes, attempting to reconnect. However, I brushed off my ex-girlfriend and never saw her again. Dealing with guilt over Andy's death proved perplexing. The mind has its ways of rationalizing the inexplicable. I convinced myself that the strange encounter with Lilith had to be a product of my depression and excessive drinking. I absolved myself of responsibility for Andy's demise. How could I be responsible for an accident? That's what I told myself, but deep down, I knew it was far from the truth. I chose to disregard the lingering scent of Lilith's perfume that filled my flat for months until I moved out. Back then, I didn't fully comprehend the extent of my involvement. But Lilith had fulfilled one promise. My life indeed took a turn for the better. In the aftermath of Andy's passing, I sobered up. The urge to drown my sorrows in alcohol was strong, but as soon as the drink touched my lips, I spat it out. Instead, I embraced routine getting up in the mornings, grooming myself, and regaining my physical shape. Within a few weeks, I secured a new job and diligently pursued my career growth. Money found its way back into my pocket after months of absence, and I discovered a newfound self-assurance. I re-entered the dating scene, effortlessly attracting attention and engaging in short-lived affairs. But then Andrea entered the picture. Andrea's physical resemblance to Lilith was uncanny. They shared the same red hair and green eyes. However, their personalities diverged greatly. Andrea exuded a bubbly and kind-hearted nature, incapable of harming anyone. Our whirlwind romance led to marriage in just 6 months. A year and a half after my friend's abrupt demise, life couldn't have been better. I had launched my own successful construction company, reaping substantial profits. Andrea and I had secured our own house, a new car, and we were expecting a baby boy. I had attained all I'd ever wished for, but truth be told, I wasn't content. Sleep evaded me as nightmares haunted my nights, replaying the horrific scene of Andy's fatal accident, his body mangled and beyond repair. And Lilith, she occupied my thoughts incessantly. Day by day I envisioned her, often catching glimpses of her face in the crowd before she vanished. Whether Lilith was real remained uncertain, yet my fixation on her endured, an enchantment with the woman who had forever altered my life. Naturally, I couldn't confide in anyone about this. Regardless of whether my encounter with Lilith was real or a construct of my mind, I recognized it as a secret I could never disclose. As expected, the idyllic period didn't last. 2 years post my supernatural experience and Andy's untimely death, Andrea was in her 6th month of pregnancy, and I toiled long hours to provide for us. On a late Friday evening, fatigue from relentless work and sleepless nights made it nearly impossible to keep my eyes open. In my exhausted state, I inadvertently ran a red light. I glimpsed a speeding truck heading towards me at the last instant, but it was already too late. The colossal vehicle collided with my car's driver's side, obliterating my small vehicle and my body within. Once the shock registered in my mind, I glanced downward, observing my shattered torso and limbs. An immediate realization washed over me. I was facing death. Oddly, I felt no pain and no fear in that crucial moment. Somehow an understanding dawned that this was my destiny, my time to depart. In the waning seconds before my consciousness faded, I perceived her presence. Lilith stood by the dim roadside, watching over me with eyes brimming with sorrow. Strangely, her presence brought me comfort as I embraced my final moments. Michael Ferguson's last conscious emotion before his death was a feeling of assurance that Lilith was present to facilitate his transition. As my eyes closed, a smile graced my face. Thus concluded my initial existence in the mortal realm. Michael Ferguson met his demise on a solitary Scottish road in the mid-90s, and years later, Omar Sanchez took his first breath in West Virginia. Distinct individuals separated by a vast ocean, yet a single soul resurrected and returned to the world of the living. However, the narrative doesn't conclude here. You see, I don't just retain memories of Michael Ferguson's passing, I also recollect the events that followed. The most astonishing segment of my tale, though utterly unbelievable, stands as an undeniable truth, I assure you. My first recollection after my demise was of awakening in a plush bed, my head lifting from the pillow as the memory of the accident came rushing back. Panic briefly gripped me, but upon surveying my surroundings, I found myself ensconced within what appeared to be a five-star hotel room, complete with a canopy bed, intricate wallpaper, elegant furnishings, a well-stocked minibar, and a widescreen TV. The morning sun filtered through delicate lace curtains, and a gentle, soothing melody played in the background, instilling a sense of tranquility. Suddenly, the music yielded to a calm, disembodied male voice that addressed me directly. And what he uttered was this: "Greetings, Michael. No need for alarm. You're in a secure place, and I'm here to assist. Welcome to Hotel Limbo. Take your time to settle in and familiarize yourself with your surroundings. Once you're prepared, kindly proceed through the right-hand door. We will then initiate the orientation process." Initially, I was taken aback and bewildered by his words, but my bewilderment subsided swiftly. Somehow it all fell into place in my mind. The extraordinary events I had witnessed that day in my apartment when she appeared to me. Was this all a part of some grand design? Was my demise intended to facilitate my arrival in this place, wherever it might be? Certainty eluded me, yet I burned with a fervent desire to uncover the truth. Consequently, I rose from the bed, my feet sinking into the plush carpet, while the sweet aroma of roses enveloped me. I approached the awaiting door, a surge of energy coursing through me as I grasped the handle and turned it. Anticipating a hallway within the hotel, I was taken aback to find myself gazing upon an opulent office adorned with leather chairs, bookshelves laden with volumes, and a substantial oak desk. Behind that desk sat a genial elderly gentleman with a crown of white hair, elegantly attired in a pristine tuxedo. His smile illuminated his face as his eyes sparkled with expectation. "Ah, Michael, a pleasure to make your acquaintance, sir." He rose from his armchair, extending his hand for a handshake. I complied, sensing a warmth permeating through me. "Please, take a seat." I accepted his offer willingly, settling into a soft leather armchair positioned across from the enigmatic man. He maintained a gentle smile, his kind eyes fixed on me with sympathy as he began to speak. "Michael, I want to deliver this news without causing you undue panic, but I must share some unfortunate information. There's no sense in sugarcoating it, my friend. You're no longer among the living." He regarded me cautiously, seemingly prepared for an emotional outpour or a loss of composure. However, my reaction seemed to take him by surprise. "I'm already aware," I responded abruptly. "Well, that's quite reassuring. Actually, it's very reassuring. Many newcomers here struggle to come to terms with their new reality. Your acceptance will make my job easier," he remarked. "So, is this the afterlife?" I inquired nervously. "In a manner of speaking," the man replied, his tone measured. "At the Hotel Limbo, we assist those who have recently departed in preparing for the next phase of their journey. This realm serves as a transitional space, although I'll be honest, There are some bureaucratic procedures to navigate. A shiver ran down my spine, the weight of my impending judgment settling upon me. My voice quivered as I struggled to form my next words, asking, "Are you God?" A soft chuckle escaped the old man before he responded. "Oh no, certainly not. I am merely a humble servant, a representative of sorts. Don't be troubled, Michael. My purpose isn't to pass judgment. I'm here solely to aid you." "But you determine my ultimate destination," I pressed, my patience wearing thin. "Yes," he admitted with less certainty. "There is a protocol to follow, though it's nothing to be overly concerned about. Perhaps it's best if I show you." He snapped his fingers, prompting a pair of red satin curtains behind his desk to glide open, unveiling a sizable black television screen that suddenly sprang to life. It displayed images and marvels beyond anything I could have imagined. The initial scene he presented was one of brilliance, vitality, and contentment. I witnessed verdant fields and crystal-clear streams beneath azure skies, bathed in the glow of a radiant sun. Majestic structures came into view, ivory towers and castles crowned with resplendent spires, reminiscent of something out of a fairy tale. The land teemed with vitality. The melodious melodies of birds wafted through the air, while majestic deer traversed fields and forests. The individuals depicted on the screen encompassed a diverse array of races and beliefs. Clad in pristine white robes, they meandered through the countryside, their appreciation for every flower and creature seemingly heightened by some ethereal sense. Others toiled within castles, engaging in projects that ignited their passions, writing, singing, and construction. Each wore an expression of contentment and fulfillment. The climactic scene portrayed a lavish feast within a grand hall, long tables laden with an abundance of cuisine and delicacies from across the globe. The assembled dinner guests imbibed, dined, and shared hearty laughter, relishing both the banquet and one another's company. A pervasive sense of happiness prevailed, not a trace of discord in sight. "Heaven," I whispered, my gaze riveted to the entrancing tableau. "Indeed, quite a spectacle," the man concurred, a smile gracing his features. However, the splendor seemed almost too impeccable to be real, and I understood that this wasn't the trajectory awaiting me. "Nonetheless, there exist alternative destinations, do they not?" I inquired. The man's nod suggested he had foreseen this query. "Yes, indeed. In all honesty, only a handful managed to access heaven on their initial attempt. After all, not all of us are saintly beings." He chuckled, yet my unyielding countenance prompted him to adopt a more somber tone. "Purgatory. It's probable that you'll venture there, at least temporarily. There's invariably a toll to be paid." "May I catch a glimpse of it?" I implored, my patience waning. "Of course." The elderly man snapped his fingers once more, causing a sequence of images to materialize on the screen before me. My eyes beheld unsightly, drab gray buildings beneath an even more dismal gray sky, with a ceaseless, frigid rain cascading to the ground. Countless dispirited individuals trudged along a congested sidewalk, jostling one another as they hurried from one location to another, drenched to the bone. Within the alleyways branching off from the main thoroughfares, scrawny rats and pigeons waged battles over morsels from upturned bins. Subsequently, I observed individuals engrossed in their labor, stationed along assembly lines or confined to cramped office cubicles, their postures hunched, gazes vacant of enthusiasm, as they dutifully executed monotonous tasks devoid of meaning. Ultimately, my attention was drawn to a dejected figure seated alone, confronting what appeared to be a budget microwave meal. Heaved sighs punctuated the man's feeble attempts to ingest the unpalatable sustenance. "It's not the most agreeable place, but it could be worse," the elderly man remarked, an awkward smile adorning his countenance. Indeed, I ruminated, though refrained from vocalizing. Purgatory presented a rather forlorn panorama, yet truthfully, it didn't diverge significantly from the realm of the living. Nonetheless, I was cognizant that the elderly man wasn't divulging the complete narrative. More revelations awaited, and my curiosity demanded satisfaction. "What about the alternative destination?" I interjected firmly, resolute. "What about hell?" An unmistakable ashen hue seemed to drain from the elderly man's deeply lined face. His jaw slackened and his eyes widened in astonishment. "Hell?" he exclaimed, taken aback. "Young man, your concern shouldn't center around that realm. You don't fit the profile of someone destined for such a place." "I wish to witness it," I insisted. My unwavering determination appeared to catch him off guard, prompting his reluctant concession to my entreaty. "Very well, Michael, I shall grant your request, but I must forewarn you, the spectacle will be far from pleasant." I believed myself prepared for the impending revelation, yet the horrors that unfolded on the screen exceeded even my most dreadful nightmares. I gazed upon a desolate land, devoid of life and enveloped in darkness. In the center there stood a macabre scene, a ring of gaunt, unclothed figures bound in chains, compelled to march in an unending circle. Each of them bore the burden of hefty rocks and endured the lashings of a snarling, infernal creature. This beast stood at a towering 20 feet, adorned with horns atop its head and hooves in place of feet. Its eyes emanated a blazing crimson glow, and when its monstrous maw parted open, I beheld a multitude of teeth reminiscent of a shark's formidable grin. A cruel, malevolent laughter erupted from the demon as it cracked its massive whip, its cat-o'-nine tails striking the raw and tortured flesh of the damned. Their anguished cries pierced the air. My vision shifted to a nightmarish city encased by walls, its bridges and military edifices deteriorating under the assault of unceasing rain and the relentless barrage of lightning from the starless sky. Within the streets, strewn with debris, an ongoing war raged on. Soldiers hailing from various epochs clashed in gruesome combat, from Roman legionnaires to World War I infantrymen. With weapons ranging from axes to swords and bayonets, they engaged in a macabre and senseless bloodbath. The downpour mercilessly washed away the rivers of blood. Horror gripped me as winged demons akin to harpies descended from the obsidian heavens. They set upon the wounded soldiers, rending open their abdomens and devouring their entrails. The victims writhed and screamed in agony, their lives torn apart. Finally, I found myself on a searing beach, lining a lake of sulfur and flames. More naked souls fled in sheer terror along the shoreline, their feet aflame as they cast fearful gazes upward. It wasn't long before the source of their dread revealed itself. Abruptly, a colossal predator descended from the heavens, an ebony dragon, colossal as a bus, bearing burning crimson eyes and a monstrous maw that exhaled fire. The wretched were engulfed in a blazing inferno, their charred remains seized in the dragon's formidable talons. It shredded the burnt corpses and savored their still warm flesh. "I can't believe it," I whispered in shock, my whole body quivering as my mind tried to process the horrifying images I had just witnessed. The elderly man appeared unsettled, even embarrassed, stumbling over his words in the aftermath. "Well, I did attempt to forewarn you," he said hesitantly. Then a smile slowly crept back onto his face, and he added, "But don't be overly concerned, Michael. I've gone through your record, and you're not the sort to end up in hell. Eternal condemnation is reserved for those unrepentant sinners, tyrants, child molesters, and murderers, all those nefarious types." His grin broadened, his aim to reassure me evident, but it was futile. That familiar sensation of sickness churned in my stomach, accompanied by a burning at the back of my skull. It dawned on me that even after death, I could still experience guilt. That moment from 2 years ago, in my squalid apartment, played out vividly in my mind, as Lilith showed me those images of Andy seducing my girlfriend. The rage I had felt, the words I had uttered, "He deserves to die." I was a killer, yet somehow they had overlooked it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be in this situation. I could have kept quiet, hoped for the best, but living for eternity with this burden was inconceivable. I parted my dry lips, ready to speak, but before I could, the office door swung open, revealing a figure bursting in with an aura of fury. My gaze lifted, caught by those emerald eyes and the cascade of crimson hair. My heart skipped a beat as I laid eyes on the person I cherished, because the woman who had stormed into the room was Lilith, and she was furious. The usually composed elderly man was taken aback by this unexpected intrusion, blurting out, "What is the meaning of this? How dare you interrupt my meeting?" "Shut up, you old fool," Lilith roared in anger. "This soul belongs to me." I stared into the flames of her anger, captivated by her presence, the same intensity I had felt 2 years ago flooding back. The man behind the desk was flustered, his response stuttering. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. Michael here is undergoing the afterlife processing. It's all quite routine." You fools have once again managed to mess things up, Lilith exclaimed furiously. Michael is mine. A pact was formed and sealed in blood. I witnessed astonishment in the man's eyes. His jaw fell open as his entire demeanor shifted. He leveled an accusing glare at me before inquiring, "Is this true, Michael?" I felt a wave of shame as my dark secret was finally laid bare. I couldn't bring myself to respond verbally, so I simply nodded my head meekly, confessing my guilt. I avoided meeting the man's gaze while doing so. "Oh," he sighed, disappointment clearly resonating in his voice. "Well, Mr. Ferguson, it seems there's nothing more I can do for you." He gestured towards Lilith and stated, "You may take him." A dreadful sinking sensation overcame me as I peered into her intense eyes. "Come along, Michael, let's depart," she commanded. I glanced back at the elderly man seated behind the desk, silently imploring his support. Yet he had turned his back to me, his chair now facing the distant wall. Resigned to my fate, I rose on trembling legs and followed Lilith to the door. It was the same entrance through which I had initially entered, but deep down I knew it wouldn't lead us back to the opulent hotel room. Lilith placed her slender hand on the door handle, opening it to reveal my very own personal hell. I stood in the doorway, stunned into silence, struggling to believe my eyes. It was an exact duplicate of my squalid, grimy bedsit from 2 years ago, down to the vacant vodka bottles and stained couch. To my horror, I realized I was being returned to the lowest point of my life, that time when I teetered on the edge of suicide, just before Lilith had appeared in my life. I turned to Lilith, tears welling up as I begged for her mercy. "Please, don't make me go back there." I perceived a touch of sympathy in her gaze, although her voice remained unwavering as she responded firmly, "You must. There is no choice." Yet she surprised me by reaching out and grasping my hand. "It's okay, I'll be there with you." A warmth spread through me, drawing strength from hers. I took a step forward and entered the nightmarish replica of my former home. Almost immediately the door slammed shut behind us, and the realization of being trapped sank in. In those initial moments, panic gripped me. Lilith stood back as I frantically scoured the small flat for an exit. The front door was securely locked, and the windows were bricked up, casting a dim and perpetual light from electric lamps. My fists pounded against the walls and door, my efforts to break free proving futile. Exhaustion eventually overcame me. I sank onto the uncomfortable sofa, consumed by frustrated tears. Lilith settled beside me, placing her hand on my shoulder. "You need to adapt, Michael. This is your home now," she said in a soft tone. My reaction was one of anger, swatting her hand away and unleashing my rage in her direction. "You betrayed me. This hellhole is your doing." Lilith shot me a look that immediately filled me with remorse. Her next words were unyielding and direct. "Don't delude yourself, Michael. I warned you there would be a price to pay. I didn't coerce you into your actions." My head hung low, my heart heavy with the truth of Lilith's words. The echoes of what I had spoken 2 years earlier reverberated in my mind. He deserves to die. An uneasy silence settled, broken by an abrupt, forceful knock on the front door. Startled, I jumped to my feet, but Lilith remained unfazed, evidently anticipating our visitor's arrival. "I urge you to confront this, Michael," she said with a gravity that matched the intensifying knocks. Reluctantly, I rose from the sofa, stealing a fleeting glance at Lilith before I proceeded toward the front door. An ominous foreboding gripped me as my hand reached for the doorknob. As the previously unlocked door swung open, it revealed an unexpected sight: the interior of an elevator. My core trembled when I caught sight of the figure on the other side. It was Andy, my former closest friend, whom I had unintentionally caused the demise of 2 years prior. Or perhaps it was a malevolent being masquerading as my departed friend. Regardless, his presence struck me to the bone. Dried blood marked his forehead. A malicious grin played on his lips, and his eyes radiated fiery animosity. The voice that emerged from him was far from Andy's, bearing a deep and otherworldly resonance. "Hello there, old pal. Remember me? The time has come for you to pay," he snarled. His fists clenched as he advanced menacingly. I instinctively retreated, lifting my hands in defense as I implored for mercy. The initial blow struck with the force of a sledgehammer, sending me crashing to the ground. Without pause, the barrage continued, punch after punch, followed by brutal kicks from his weighty work boots. Agony and terror merged in my screams as Andy relentlessly assaulted me. Amidst the onslaught, I glimpsed through bloodied eyes Lilith in the doorway of the living room. She observed the violence with sorrowful eyes, yet she made no attempt to intervene. As the pain surged, consciousness wavered. Death seemed imminent under Andy's brutal onslaught, but abruptly the assault ceased. He departed from my battered form, a sadistic laugh accompanying his departure. "Farewell for now, old friend. We'll meet again soon." Once the door closed, Lilith hurried to my side. With her support, I regained my footing and followed her to the bedroom. Gently, she laid me down on the mattress. Her words carried a soft, reassuring cadence, her touch offering solace. "You'll pull through, Michael. You'll be all right." She lay beside me on the bed, cradling my shattered form and offering solace. Somehow, she channeled her abilities to mend my injuries, causing all the wounds, the cuts, fractures, and contusions to vanish within a matter of hours. Gratitude and relief washed over me as I gazed into Lilith's profound eyes, a surge of emotions engulfing me. Almost instinctively, I inched closer, aiming to kiss her, but she withdrew gently, evading the contact. A sense of embarrassment engulfed me. I was uncertain about how to proceed. Abruptly, a foreboding knock resounded on the door, and dread constricted my heart, because I was well aware of what this signified. Andy, or whatever malicious entity had commandeered his body, had returned to inflict another brutal onslaught. And thus this sequence of events became the norm for a duration I couldn't accurately gauge. Andy would subject me to merciless beatings, while Lilith would nurture me back to health. This nightmarish cycle perpetuated itself relentlessly. Allow me to clarify. I didn't merely resign myself passively to this torment. On numerous occasions, I made attempts to resist, only to find myself effortlessly overpowered by the being that had assumed my friend's likeness. Once I succeeded in outmaneuvering him, making my way through the door and into the elevator that had ferried the creature. Yet upon entry, I discovered a conspicuous absence of buttons to control the lift. Predictably, Andy yanked me out, my protests falling on deaf ears before subjecting me to another savage thrashing. While Lilith wasn't consistently present to witness these assaults, she unfailingly appeared after the ordeal to mend my wounds, materializing seemingly out of thin air through some enigmatic dark magic. During this time, my sentiments for her burgeoned. She was my lone source of hope in this self-inflicted hell. Her embrace provided warmth and sanctuary, at least momentarily. To be explicitly clear, our bond retained its fundamentally platonic nature. Carnal desires held no sway in that realm. Nonetheless, she evolved into my entire universe during that nightmarish period. Following an exceptionally brutal beating on one occasion, I found the courage to voice the question that had gnawed at me ceaselessly. "Why?" I murmured weakly, the query hanging in the air. "Why bring me here? Why endure this?" A profound sorrow shimmered within her emerald eyes, and a protracted silence lingered before she finally mustered a response. "I find myself trapped here, just like you are. The demon who torments you ensnared my soul a significant time ago. He compels me to play the role of his siren, luring others, including you. Together we ensnare unfortunate souls into these accursed blood pacts, allowing him to inflict eternal torment upon them." Her voice quivered, carrying the weight of sorrow before she continued. "I despise my actions. If I could turn back time, I would never have selected you, Michael. I am profoundly sorry for all of this." Upon absorbing her words, I nodded in understanding. To be honest, this revelation was more or less in line with what I had suspected, leaving me unsurprised. "I understand," I replied at last. "You aren't to blame. We've both committed grievous deeds, and altering the past is beyond our power." Letting out a deep sigh, I concluded, "I only wish there was an escape route for us." Lilith's eyes brightened as she responded, "Perhaps there is, at least for one of us." Confusion furrowing my brow, I struggled to grasp the meaning behind her enigmatic words. "What do you mean?" "Just wait and watch," Lilith replied, a wink accompanying her smile. And so I did. The duration of my imprisonment in that abyss and the number of times I endured beatings remained unclear. Yet I distinctly remember the day when everything shifted. I answered the door as was customary, my body quivering as I spotted Andy striding toward me, his fists clenched and eyes gleaming with sadistic delight, preparing to unleash his latest assault. I refrained from pleading for mercy or attempting to defend myself, recognizing the futility of both. Instead, I closed my eyes and braced for the inevitable impact. Yet abruptly, a forceful cry erupted from behind, a voice all too familiar to me. "Cease this at once!" Lilith's voice rang out. "Enough is enough!" Initially, shock flickered across Andy's face, morphing swiftly into fury as his eyes blazed, and he spat out his enraged retort. "Lilith, you damn traitor! How dare you challenge me? Stay out of my path!" Defiance radiated from Lilith's stance as she took a step forward, brushing past me and positioning herself between me and my demonic assailant. "No," she said firmly, her voice unwavering. "I refuse to continue with this any longer." I stood there, a helpless spectator, as the demon's rage manifested in a furious scream, and he launched himself at Lilith with a violent swing of his fist. However, she met his aggression head-on, deflecting his attack and countering with a forceful push, utilizing every ounce of strength within her. Andy was caught off guard, propelled backward into the waiting elevator, his body colliding with the unforgiving coldness of the steel walls. Pressing forward with determination, Lilith reached for the handle, her intention to slam the door shut. Yet the demon, concealed within Andy's form, couldn't resist the opportunity for a parting verbal assault, his voice echoing through the air in a scream. "You wretched creature, you will pay dearly for this!" Then abruptly she sealed the door, imprisoning him on the other side. Lilith turned her gaze to me, her expression still ablaze with defiance, an inferno of rebellion against her infernal master. But amidst my relief, a shiver of dread coursed through me as I recollected the demon's ominous parting vow. "My God, what have you done?" I muttered, fear clawing at my voice, and Lilith's eyes mirrored a profound terror. In the wake of that encounter, Lilith departed, leaving me to my solitude, where I grappled with a torrent of conjectures about her fate. Then one day my eyes opened to find her perched at the edge of my bed, an unwavering gaze fixed on me as I slumbered. Overwhelmed with relief and joy at her reappearance, I embraced her fervently. Yet her countenance bore a weight that dimmed the elation. Fatigue etched lines on her face, and the fiery determination that once blazed in her eyes had waned. "What happened? What did that fiend do to you?" I inquired, concern lacing my words. Shaking her head, she replied, "It's not important. What matters is your escape." Perplexed, I questioned, "What do you mean?" "You're being released on a technicality," she revealed, her smile faint but genuine. "Seems I omitted a few terms and conditions when we struck our deal. The bureaucracy in the afterlife is astonishing." Her words held a hint of amusement before she continued. "In any case, the crucial point is that you're being given a second chance, a completely new life, and none of this nightmare will remain in your memory." The words I was hearing seemed unbelievable, and their meaning eluded me completely. "But what about you?" I cried out in a panicked state, my heart racing. "Won't you be joining me?" She averted her eyes, gently pushing me away while delivering her response. "It's not possible. The terms of my agreement remain unbroken, and a price must be paid." I vehemently shook my head, determination in my eyes. "I won't leave without you." "It's necessary," Lilith replied, her grip on my hand firm as she locked her gaze onto mine. "You'll always be in my memories, Michael." Her lips met mine in a kiss, and a surge of energy pulsed through me, awakening a buried force within. As she pulled back, a sudden dizziness overcame me, and I felt myself fading into unconsciousness as darkness encroached. Amidst the fading light, I caught one last glimpse of Lilith's countenance, a gentle smile playing on her lips, a tear glistening in her eye as she observed my departure. And thus, this becomes my narrative, a tale of my inaugural existence, demise, and a fleeting sojourn within a nightmarish dominion. Michael Ferguson perished in a car accident in Scotland in 1995, as evidenced by archived news chronicles of the era. His widow Andrea remained behind, and the son he never encountered entered the world 3 months after his passing. Indeed, I possess a son whose age surpasses mine. Mike Ferguson Jr. I stumbled upon his profile on Facebook, a chilling sensation enveloping me as I gazed upon his photograph. The idea of reaching out to him crossed my mind, yet how could I begin to explain any of this? Hence, Michael Ferguson's demise in 1995 coincided with Omar Sanchez's birth in 2007. Consequently, my essence endured 12 years of torment within that infernal realm before Lilith orchestrated my release. Without her intervention, I would still be trapped there, ensnared in perpetual suffering. Instead, I now inhabit the existence of an American high schooler. Were it not for the head injury, these recollections would remain veiled, and perhaps a measure of contentment could be preserved. Alas, revelations have emerged, shattering the tranquility of ignorance, a state forever unattainable. Thoughts of Lilith and her selfless sacrifice consume me. I am aware of her anguish on the opposite plane, subject to the whims of a malicious demon, punishing her for her perceived betrayal. I cannot accept this reality. Despite all, a profound concern for Lilith lingers within me, and I shall not cease my endeavors until I secure her liberation. The path forward remains unclear, but my resolve stands unwavering. I shall seek counsel from priests, mystics, mediums, demonologists, and investigators of the paranormal, anyone who might harbor a link to the other realm. Time holds no sway over me. I am committed to the cause, even if it encompasses the entirety of Omar's lifespan. Lilith, I am coming to rescue you. Bound together eternally, this is our destined fate, and I shall battle unceasingly on your behalf.